From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, consider this with Kathy Wyatt, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 28th season and this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, the Israel-Iran war. Joining us to talk more about it are UNO's Curtis Hutt, a professor of religious studies. He joins us via Zoom from Hillsborough, North Carolina. Here in the studios, we have James Clark, a historian and scholar of the Middle East and Central Asia. Dr. Clark's primary research focus is modern Iran. Thank you both for being here and welcome.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Dr. Hutt, I want to start with you. Please recap what happened on Saturday, June 21st.
Let's go back a bit first to June 13th. This is when Israel preemptively struck Iran, killing key military leaders, including nuclear scientists. Iran, in response, targeted Israel with ballistic missiles. Most critically, when Israel gained control of the skies, President Trump, on June 21st, ordered the U.S. military to strike nuclear sites using bunker-busting bombs for the first time at Fordow, the nuclear site that's located deep under a mountain. Just to update, President Trump declared a ceasefire between Iran and Israel on June 23rd, yesterday.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the program. Broad strokes, Dr. Hutt, how is the world responding to U.S. involvement here?
Today, it looks like many are supporting President Trump's actions, especially his recent announcement of a ceasefire and his goal of bringing peace between Iran and Israel and in the greater Middle East. Many experts, though, are still worried that this conflict is going to spiral out of control, leading to disruptions to global oil markets and nuclear proliferation. And by the way, we don't know if Iranian-enriched fissile material was destroyed in the strikes. Without a diplomatic agreement and inspections, Iran may take the path of North Korea and develop nuclear weapons in secret.
It's hard to believe that just a week ago, right, we had right-wing personality, Tucker Carlson, clashing with Senator Ted Cruz because the senator didn't know basics about Iran. What was your reaction to that interview?
Well, it's kind of relevant.
I'm sorry to say that I was not surprised. I'm not in the habit of siding with Tucker Carlson, but he really did expose Senator Cruz's ignorance, as well as his messianic religious commitments to supporting the state of Israel at all costs. Their exchange about the influence of AIPAC, or the American Israel Political Action Committee, and the Israeli government on politics in the United States was revealing. It exposes conflict amongst President Trump's supporters between America First advocates and those championing Israel, oftentimes for religious, messianic purposes.
Okay, it brings us to Dr. Clark now. We could all learn a little bit more here about Iran. We're going to start with a geography lesson. As we do so, we're going to put up a map. And if you could just tell us what's important to know as we're looking at this map.
Okay, certainly. In looking at one of the things I think that it comes out very quickly when you look at a map of Iran is how strategically located it is. And when you look around the borders, on the east side, it borders Afghanistan, which we're very familiar with, Pakistan, and then that's the road to the Indian subcontinent. In the south, you have the Indian Ocean, the Strait of Hormuz, which you also hear mentioned on the news about being an important choke point for oil coming out of the Persian Gulf, which is in southern Iran. Then on the western side, Iraq, which is very familiar to us, and the rest of the Middle East. And then Turkey to the north, and the Caucasus, and then the Caspian Sea, and then Turkmenistan. So the strategic location makes Iran very important, and also historically has made it a crossroads between Asia and the rest of Southwest Asia and Africa and Europe to a great extent. There also, one other thing in a broader stroke is I mentioned the different countries around. There's also Iran borders Central Asia, the larger Central Asia to the north, and like I said, the Indian subcontinent to the east, and the Middle East to the west. So its geographical position makes it a very important country.
Okay, and we have some fast facts now that we want to put up for our viewers. Walk us through those, if you would, please, Dr. Clark.
Certainly. Yeah, the official name now, since the Iranian Revolution of 1978-1979, is actually Islamic Republic of Iran, the IRI, as it is sometimes stated. Form of government is an Islamic Republic, to a great extent based upon the writings of Khomeini and in famous book that he wrote in the early 1970s when he was in Iraq. The capital is Tehran, which is in the north-central part of the country. And since you give the population, actually the current population, if you look, is 90 million right now. One interesting fact is at the time of the revolution in 1978-79, it was 35 million, which gives you an idea of how much Iran has grown. Tehran, and also to give you population figures, is now a city. Tehran, the city itself, is 9 million. The greater Tehran metropolitan area is 16 million. It's an enormous city. The official language is Farsi, or Persian, as we say in English, which is used throughout the country and taught in all of the schools. There are many, many other languages that are used in the country as well, which maybe we can talk about later. The money which is used is the rial. Oftentimes when you go to Iran, you don't hear the term rial, you hear the word tuman, which refers to 100 rials used in exchange. The area, which 636,000 square miles may not mean very much, but Iran is the 17th largest country in the world. So it's a very large country in terms of area. It also, and one thing that you don't have here is that you have at the center of the country the Iranian plateau. And then you have these mountain ranges. The Alborz Mountains border the north, just south of the Caspian Sea. The Zagros Mountains are run along the border with Iraq on the west side. And Iran actually has very few navigable rivers, and especially the first one there, the Karun River, is perhaps one of the only ones, which is in the south, flows into the northern end of the Persian Gulf. But also Karkin, the Zayandi route, and runs through Isfahan. Then there's another river that runs north into the Caspian, but very few large rivers.
Okay, what can you tell us about the people and the culture?
Perhaps the most interesting thing or telling thing is that I would use would be the word diversity. And even though we talk about, and just like Mr. Cruz in the television shot was saying, we understand it to be a Persian country. When Iran, or it used to be called Persia also until modern times, Persian is the standard language, but Persians as an ethnic group are usually only considered to be about 50% of the country. And other than Persians, you have Turks, you have Kurds, you have Lurs, you have Baluchis, you have a wide variety of other ethnic groups in a general way who live on the periphery of the country around it. So there's this tremendous diversity. Another dimension of that is religion. And even though 90% of the Iranian population are Muslims of the Shiite sect, There are also Sunni Muslims, especially the Lurs and the Kurds and the Baluchis. There are also Christians, especially Armenians and Assyrians, and there are also Jewish communities, as well as the ancient Iranian religion of Zoroastrianism. So you have this diversity as well.
Dr. Clark, it would be a good time to ask you why your great interest in Iran?
I always tell people that this is a long story. But one of perhaps the interesting aspect of it is I went to college at the time of the Iranian Revolution, 1977. The Iranian Revolution began in January of 1978. And at that time, there were 70,000 Iranian students studying at American universities. They were the largest group ever of any country up until that time. And as it became fascinating for me to see how they became so politically inspired, and these debates that went on in the student union among the Iranian students at Oklahoma State University, where I was studying. So that made me curious, and there were lots of Arab students also, and I was also became curious about that. So in one sense, and I was telling somebody recently, I saw the Iranian Revolution from inside, but in the United States, because everything that happened in Iran, you would see it reflected among the students, on campus at Oklahoma State. So that is what started it, and I began studying Persian. And I began reading books about Iran and the Middle East and Islam and so forth, and
wow.
It progressed
Amazing.
from there.
What can you tell us about its nuclear program?
About the nuclear program, one of the things, well, there are a few things. One of these is that Iran was one of the original signers of the NPT, the Non-Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, in 1970. It began to build its first nuclear reactor, the Germans did, in 1975. That came to a halt with the revolution, and it remained the nuclear program in general, or any aspiration to continue building that nuclear reactor, which was at Bushehr, which is on the Persian Gulf, but any other program related to nuclear development. Through the 1980s until 1995, and the Iranians engaged the Russians to finish building that same reactor. The next major development comes in 2002, when one of the Iranian opposition groups revealed that there was a secret nuclear facility south of Tehran at the area called Arak, A-R-A-K. And that's where the whole current debate about what Iran is doing, and with the United States, Israel comes in later, but especially with Europeans, and especially with the United Nations and the IAEA, the nuclear organization of the United Nations. The Iranians were, that's facility that was revealed, they were enriching uranium, but in secret, and the IAEA did not know about it. So this brought up a lot of questions, which actually, to a great extent, all the way down to today, what causes the problem, even though Iran is a signer of the NPT, and even though Iran allows IAEA inspectors in, even though sometimes it's kind of a game, there was this suspicion that was created, which has lingered all the way up until today. Exactly what are the Iranians doing? That continued up until the signing of what was called the JCPOA, which was the Joint Plan of Action under the Obama administration, which was an agreement for the Iranians to scale back their enrichment program somewhat in exchange for relaxing sanctions and allowing the IAEA to come in and inspect the program. But of course, that's the same agreement that was pulled out of by the Americans under Trump in 2018. And that caused the Iranians to begin to kind of pull back in terms of the inspections and to begin to expand the program somewhat, which is when they began to build the facility at Fordow under the mountain. And they already had the facility in Isfahan, but to expand those. That was in 2018. This has continued down until today, and basically explains, and no agreement has been reached yet, explains why we got to where we're at right now.
Briefly, walk us through the history with Israel.
The history with Israel, well, to put it in a nutshell, Iran actually historically, under the monarchy, under the Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the second of the Pahlavi Shahs who fell from power in 1979, Israel was quick to recognize the state of Israel. And Israel had an embassy in Iran and had relatively good relations with the Iranian government until the Islamic Revolution. Like everything changes with the revolution. And during the 1980s, to put it simply, after the revolution, Iran became, saw Israel as an enemy in a sense, but to use a strong word, or a rival, took up the Palestinian cause, might be a better way to put it. And this figured into the view of the United States, and this gets into other things. We want to talk about the hostage crisis and everything. But after that, we can basically say after the revolution, the Islamic Republic has basically taken the Palestinian side in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict all the way down until today.
Okay, and what about now then Iran's relationship with the U.S.?
With the United States, it's kind of been up and down in some sense. As we all know, and those who were old enough to remember the hostage crisis, actually the United States had its embassy in Tehran after the revolution and still had relations with Iran until the hostage crisis, in which everything changed. Of course, the hostage crisis ended in January of 1981. And during the 1980s, there was not the hostility that develops later. And we see that in the Iran-Contra affair. There were actually, Israel was involved in shipping arms to Iran to assist Iran in its 8-year-long war with Iraq, which lasted until 1988. In 1990, Ayatollah Khomeini died in 1989. The war ended in 88, and there was a change took place. And this is at the time when the present Ayatollah, or Supreme Leader Khomeini, replaced Khomeini. But Iran took a harder line. So during the 1990s, it began to form alliances with these various militias, which we hear about today. Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, later on when the Yemen civil war develops, comes about, and also in Iraq, which was especially after the United States invades Iraq in 2003. That brought about a great deal more hostility with the United States, between Iran and the United States. And since that time, and with the nuclear program, when it was uncovered in 2002, this added another dimension to it. And in one sense, they've all come together now, or come to a head in one sense. That was probably the best, the simplest way that I can put it. And up through the 2000s, One other development is that in Iran from 1997 to 2005, you had these reformers who were in power. And there was actually the Iranian government at that time tried to reach out and to reduce the hostility and have dialogue. This was a time when, under President Clinton, the United States actually apologized for American involvement in a coup d'etat in 1953. But then that passed. And then there was further hostility or tension under the Bush era. Then with the Obama era, there was again an attempt to try to reach out to the Iranians, which, as we see with the JCPOA, that also went by the wayside. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of been up and down, and we see another one of those rise in tensions at the present time because of what's going on in the wider Middle East.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hutt, what about the United States and Israel? Briefly walk us through that, and then we're going to get to how we go forward from here.
Okay, I did want to add one thing to what James said, and that is that the Iranians do view themselves as a protector of Islamic holy sites in Jerusalem. That's one thing you cannot ignore is, it's Al-Aqsa, what Jews call the Temple Mount. And this is a site which, frankly, billions of Muslims, 2 billion Muslims around the world are concerned with. And Iran wraps itself in the defense of Al-Aqsa all of the time. Let me just say about the United States' relationship with Israel over the years. In 1947, immediately following World War II and the Holocaust, the UN voted to partition Palestine and establish a state of Israel. At this time, the justifications for this, supplied by Jews, Jewish Zionists around the world in different countries, these justifications were primarily secular. Most Jews arriving in Israel were not religious. They were focused on establishing a safe haven from persecution and genocide, and the United States backed them up on this. Diving deeper, though, I think it's helpful to go back even further when answering this question. In the 19th century and early 20th century, there were many Christian end-of-the-world movements in the United States. You know the names of many of them: the Church of Latter-day Saints, Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Pentecostals. The apocalypticism that they advanced, it really expanded rapidly, even amongst evangelical communities in the United States, with the establishment of the State of Israel in 48 and then the conquering of Jerusalem in 67. Today, Jerusalem has become ground zero for these Christian groups, messianic groups that expect the imminent return of Jesus and the building of a new temple and New Jerusalem. Amazingly, in my view, I'm the Jewish Studies professor at UNO. Amazingly, such messianism, without references to Jesus, has come to influence religious nationalist forms of Judaism in Israel, especially amongst settlers and those who claim or make claims like those made by Senator Cruz to support their goals of Judaizing and annexing all of Greater Israel. Historically, rabbinic Judaisms really shunned such messianism. So I think the United States Christian communities have brought a lot of messianism into this conflict, and it has been adopted by some religious Jews.
Thank you. We are talking about the Israel-Iran war today. We have less than 4 minutes remaining. I want to go ahead and put up a picture, graphic of 3 leaders here. And in the minutes we have remaining, we did mention earlier that on the day of this recording, there was news of a ceasefire. But as we put up these photos, I want to start with you, Dr. Clark. Like in 30 seconds or so, tell us what the leader of Iran is going to need to do to help keep the peace moving forward.
One of the things, it's difficult for me to say exactly what he needs to do, but let me say something about Iranian decision making. Lots of times, and his official title is Supreme Leader, but he is not a dictator. And throughout the time that he has been this powerful person in the Iranian government, it's more or less a collaborative decision making. He's consulting a lot of other people within the Iranian government. So I think that whatever the Iranian government does, first of all, it wants to stop the fighting and to lessen the violence as much as it can. Perhaps get back to negotiations later, but because of events and being attacked by both Israel and the United States, it makes it difficult, at least in the short term. So we'll have to see exactly what direction the Iranians go.
Thank you. Dr. Hutt, what about Israel?
You give me tough questions, Kathy.
And you have like 30 seconds for this, Dr. Hutt.
I don't think Prime Minister Netanyahu can do anything to make the situation better, as his government and coalition partners are a big part of the problem. The Israeli Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, other people like Bezalel Smotrich, and extremists in the Israeli government openly talk about ethnically cleansing Gaza, and even Palestinians on the West Bank. Muslims and ancient Christian communities like Armenians in Jerusalem fear for the future of their holy sites. These Christian churches are much older than the messianically inclined Christian Zionists today. And by the way, I just want to add quickly, it's important to remember that there are only 7 million, just over 7 million Jews in Israel and 16 million worldwide. That's against over 2 billion Muslims and even more Christians.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Clark. Very limited time. What about President Trump? What needs to happen here?
I think that what he wants to do, and saying what needs to happen is difficult, but I think that the ceasefire needs to hold, and for the United States to somehow begin to talk with Iran again by whatever means at some point. But that is what needs to be done. But it's very uncertain. With the rapidity of events that are occurring these days, we'll have to see how quickly that takes place.
Dr. Clark, Dr. Hutt, I want to thank you both for joining us today to talk about the Israel-Iran war. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise. And as with so much else, time will tell. I want to thank our students who are working so hard behind the scenes, and of course, to all of you for watching. We will see you next week. Thank you.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television in the School of Communication. More information and program archives can be found at nebraskapublicmedia.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call the UNO School of Communication at 402-554-2600 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.